Alright, so this video is going to be about not a new gun, but actually one that I've had for a while. Don't mind this scope set up with only one ring. I was just fucking around with it and I don't know, just wanted to see if it would actually work. And actually it's not too bad with only one scope ring and being such a small scope, so it doesn't weigh a lot. It definitely has a little bit of flex to it, but I mean, it gets the job done. So, but besides this whole mounting situation, actually it's not gonna matter anymore. Two things. One, this is a GMP low profile tactical M14 mount or whatever, and it's made for AEGs. So as you see here, I have their flash hider shims, and I had to layer them up a little bit and stick them underneath the mount, so when I clamp everything down, it doesn't move. It's in line with the bore, which is very important. But it's made for an AEG, so you know, most companies and guns themselves in airsoft, even though they're the same model, will have slightly different tolerances, and this is the case. So it works the best out of all the other mounts I've used, but I'm going to try to get an actual mount for the WE M14 by RA Tech. I know WE makes their own. That one's kind of hard to find in the US, and if I'm going to be ordering from overseas, I'm just going to get RA Tech. I've heard a lot of good things about the RA Tech one, working beautifully without having to shim it and all that bullshit. So I'm just going to get the RA Tech one. I already have a bunch of RA Tech on here anyway, so might as well go sort of all out. But other than that, this is gonna become an M1 Garand. Yeah, you heard me. I'm gonna make a gas blowback M1 Garand. Now, this is not gonna be the first ever. There's a guy that I've been talking to on a group that I'm a part of. He has made a M1 Garand from a WE M14. Very beautiful too. Blue. Okay. And there is the Marushan 8mm version, gas blowback M1 Garand. Those are very expensive, very rare to find, and the actual clip, it uses a clip system just like the real M1 Garand. Those are hard to find. I know people have 3D printed their own and everything, but it was just too nice of a gun to actually be used on the field. It's a very, the Marushan M1 Garand gas blowback is beautiful. It ejects the clip after the last round. I'm sure you can use it on the field, but I don't know, that thing's too nice. But M14, like the M1 Garand, uses a very similar action. Pretty much looks exactly the same. The only difference you can really see is that, well, one, the M1 Garand doesn't have full auto, so you don't have this tap-it bar and you don't have the fire selector, which to convert to M1 Garand is easy. You just take out this lever, which is like one pin or one screw, pop this out, you can take the tap-it plate off really easily, and boom. The other thing, the M1 Garand doesn't have a bolt release like the M14 does. So when you pull back the bolt, you can lock it in, or if it's on last round, you know, if you can push up a little bit. But this mainly for locking back. M1 Garand doesn't have that. I can get into the whole how the M1 Garand locks back. I'm not going to, because this is airsoft, so it won't even happen. But on the M1 Garand, you have something similar though. You'll have like a little lever here that has a bar that goes about to here. If you pull up pictures, you'll see what I'm talking about. That is actually not for bolt lock. That is your clip ejection. Let's say you need to eject the clip you have in the rounds that are left inside. You just pull back the bolt, you know, you pull it back, push this button, and the clip and the rest of the bullets just go flying out. So that's what that's for. So I did toy around. The guy that I've been talking to, he basically converted this lever with the arm that comes out. He took, I guess it was Bondo, and he Bondoed the receiver, so it basically, when he filed and sanded and finished and repainted, it looked just like an M1 Garand receiver. I'm probably not going to do that right now, because I still want to have the ability to, if I want to run an M14, I can take it off out of the M1 Garand stock, take off the M1 Garand parts, slap this in to the M14 stock and have an M14. Maybe down the road I'll buy a separate M14 that I will just keep as an M14, but for now I'm gonna have to try and make it so I can semi-easily switch between M1 Garand and M14. So a little bit about the WE M14. It's got like a 24-inch barrel. I believe I use a like 540 millimeter inner. It's the stock inner. I do have the upgraded bucking, Maple Leaf Auto Buck, I think 70 degree. I have a aluminum end pass nozzle. Got the RA Tech steel trigger group, which is a must if you own a WE M14. You must get, I know it's a lot of money, it's $220 or more just for the trigger group, but it's a must. If you really want to use this like effectively and not like count every single shot you do, because the stock trigger group lasts barely 1,000 BBs, barely. So unless if you really only take a couple shots per game, then it'll last you. This, my old stock trigger group lasted me 1 game, not even. About 3/4 of the way through the day at my airsoft field, it just crapped out. It was done, and that was on the first day. So I thankfully was able to find a good deal on a second-hand M14 with a bunch of Artec parts, and so I bought it. I mean, I think I got it for like $500, and it came with a trigger group. It came with a steel bolt, which I haven't installed it yet. Came with the steel Artec steel tappet plate. It came with Artec bolt catch. It came with Artec bolt bar or action bar, whatever you want to call it. So it came with a bunch of Artec parts, and I just pretty much was like, yeah. And it came with like 6 mags. So, you know, the mags alone were like almost $300. So I saved a bit of money. It was secondhand, so I took kind of a risk, but it paid out. I took all the old parts I had, put it into the M14 that I bought, and I sold that off. It was, by the way, the SOCOM 16 version, so it was the short barrel with the Picatinny scout mount, which is nice, but not my style, so I traded that off. So, to do this M1 Garand conversion, there's, if I can find room for this thing. To do this M1 Garand conversion, from what the guy I was talking to, first thing you're going to talk about is the mag. M1 Garands do not have a box mag, they have an internal magazine. So if you have a box mag sticking out the bottom of an M1 Garand, that's not going to look right at all. If anything, it's just going to look like a M1A SOCOM or whatever. So, pretty much I've been thinking about this conversion for almost a year or two before I talked to this guy. And surprisingly enough, it's pretty much the same plan I had. It's nice to see it actually done and confirm that what project I want to take on is actually feasible. So besides just cutting the mag, right here you can see the line is pretty much where the bottom of the receiver will be. On the M1 Garand is actually a little bit deeper of a mag well to store the internal magazine and the mechanism, so it's not as flush. So if you think about it, the M1 Garand magazine well comes out to about here, so you still have some more room here, and it comes down just a little bit more, I believe. So that works out. Basically, it's always good to cut. We don't even have to cut. I'm not going to take it apart. That will be in the future. But the magazine internals, the actual gas reservoir, does come in two pieces. You got your top half here with the valve and all this, I don't remember the name, but you have the top half that has everything. Your magazine, your actual magazine for the BBs, the spring and the follow and everything, this actually sits in its own separate plastic carrier that is bolted around here with a screw to hold it to the reservoir. So you basically have a magazine with three pieces. You got your BB storage, and then you got your gas storage, and then you got your valve, release valve and output valve and all that up here. So like I said, underneath the plate here you'll have, well, three screws. One screw that actually holds the whole mag together inside the shell, and then you'll have two other screws on the other side of the fill valve or the HPA valve that hold the two halves of the reservoir together. So what he did was he took the reservoir apart into the two halves. I believe he also cut down a little bit more on the top reservoir so he had more space for the HPA line and everything. And then he bolted on and epoxied on a plate that was just a regular piece of, like, I guess, sheet metal or something. What I'm gonna try to do differently, and it's gonna be hopefully a little bit cleaner, is instead of making a whole new plate, I'm gonna take the bottom of the second reservoir chamber and just cut the top off. You already have the two bolts that hold it together. All you just need to do is find shorter bolts. So it's probably gonna be a lot of filing, fitting, just to make sure that both halves come together. And then I'm probably gonna have to use O-rings or gasket sealer or something. And so I'll still have the original hole for the HPA line. I would just need a bunch of fittings and everything, but that will be probably in my other videos. I'll go into it a little bit more, but there's a whole process. I don't even know if my plan is gonna work. Maybe I might have to do exactly what this guy did, but that's the magazine. Second part is the stock. Now you can go on eBay, you can find, I found a great deal for like a genuine M1 Garand stock with all the metal fittings and the butt stock and everything. It came with pretty much everything you needed for the stock. The barrel bands and all that jazz. And it was only like $100 bucks. And yeah, I was about to buy that right then. But what I've been talking to him about, which I'm very happy I did, was the actual M1 Garand stock, well, is its correct size, whereas most airsoft guns, they're a little bit bigger to accommodate things, and I don't know why, but so what he actually used for his stock was a ICS M1 Garand. It's an airsoft AEG M1 Garand, which but it does have a real wood stock and it has all the metal furnishings you need. Sadly, ICS M1 Garand new is about $450, and I'm not gonna pay $450 for something I'm just gonna strip and use for the stock and maybe some other fittings. But thankfully I found one used for about $250, so that's gonna help. So pretty much, obviously, besides getting the receivers to fit in, you gotta get the trigger group to fit in, and he said it does take a bit of work, but it's nothing crazy. It's just a bunch of sanding down high spots so the receiver fits in with no issue. The second issue is up front. Now, the M1 Garand might look a little bit shorter than an M14 because the hand guards aren't as far back from the muzzle. But if you really want to think about it, M1 Garand stock is pretty much the same thing as an M14, except it has that forward hand guard here. That's a separate piece. So pretty much the M14 and the M1 Garand are pretty much exactly the same. The only thing is that it has a different gas system, so that's why that you have that separate hand guard that actually goes to the end of the muzzle, because then you have the actual gas port right here. The gas port on an M1 Garand is only, I believe, like an inch or two behind the end of the muzzle, whereas you can see on M14 it's a good almost 6 inches away. So I could be very lazy, get that forward hand guard, slap it on here and say it's an M1 Garand, but besides the magazine area, they're very similar. But I shouldn't have to do anything besides take off the flash hider. Obviously that different gas tube on an M1 Garand, I'm gonna take off the ICS M1 Garand and see if I can fit it onto the M14. Since they're M14 and M1 Garand are very similarly spec'd rifles in terms of a lot of things. I'm pretty sure the airsoft versions are gonna be similar to M14 versions. So if I'm correct, it's gonna be a lot of filing, cutting, and drilling, but I'm pretty sure if I just take off the flash hider, take the gas block or gas tube and gas block assembly off the M1 Garand, I could probably slide it over this barrel, maybe put the gas tube over here or do something over here where it tightens up and doesn't swing around the barrel. And once you put the handguard on, it's going to cover all this. And if it covers all this, it's going to look like an M1 Garand. So that is my plan. It's obviously I can't really do anything until I get the M1 Garand here and start messing around. I think the first step before I do anything is work on the mag. Once I get the mag done, then I can start fitting everything into the stock. Because another issue about the mag is you cut it down a lot. So even if you can fill it with green gas, you're probably not gonna have enough gas to fire a few shots. So it has to be HPA. Now the guy that I've been talking to, he had an HPA line that ran inside the gun. So the HPA line came out of the magazine and came around the trigger unit and went into the stock. And inside the stock he had, I think it was a Wraith or Reaper or something. It was one of those like little small CO2 HPA systems with a regulator, and he was able to fit it in this ICS stock. I'm gonna be a little different. I'm just gonna go straight external HPA. I'm just gonna run the line like he did, but instead of going to a regulator and cartridge inside the stock, it's gonna come outside the stock, and I can use it from one of my other HPA tanks that I'll have to somehow hide in World War II gear. But maybe in the future I'll get the similar CO2 system he has and do that, but for now I'm gonna save myself that hassle and that money to getting the gun to function, work, and be reliable. So already, I don't think there's gonna be any issue with reliability. Most of the issues I'm gonna have is just fitment. Getting the trigger unit to fit inside, getting the mag cut down and sealed is gonna be another issue, so there's no leaks, and fitting the whole action and everything into the stock. The whole gas tube and front end assembly for the M1 Garand going onto an M14. Worst case scenario, I'll just get a bunch of scrap pipes and stuff to make it look like it. If I can't use the actual ICS, I'll then try to buy a real steel M1 Garand gas tube assembly, which are like, you can get for like 20 bucks on eBay. Try to get that to fit. I'm pretty confident I'll be able to get it to fit. It's nothing complex. If you know about M1 Garand or M14 gas assemblies, you know they just pretty much slide and pin into the barrel. So it's all about making sure that it'll slide onto the barrel. If it slides on the barrel, that's 75% of the job needed. The other 25% is getting it to stay in place and being sturdy, and that's pretty much it. So I'm not too worried about the front end assembly. I can't really worry about it until I get it, so I know what I'm dealing with. The only thing I can really do right now without having the M1 Garand in is working on the magazine. So I might do that as a separate video. If I can get this mag cut down short and hidden inside the M14 well and fire 8 rounds and lock back, then everything else will just be fitment and filing. This is the actual big project, is getting this to work, because it seems like it's almost designed to do it, but it's just off by like a ½ an inch of the reservoir's seam, to where it's like, we tease you, the reservoir does come in half, and it looks like it will be flush with the bottom of your stock, but it's about ½ an inch off. So that is my plan. If you have any suggestions, or if you have any questions, if you want reference material, I'm sure I can get you some. Just leave a comment and I'll reach out to you.